Good morning and welcome to our webinar on grant making for animal welfare. I am thrilled to be here with you today and to kick off Foundation for the Carolinas informational webinar on this very important topic. I am Whitney Feld, and I have the honor of serving as Vice President of Philanthropic Advancement. In this role, I lead FFTC Center for Personal Philanthropy and Planned Giving departments, and I'm joined by my friend and longtime advisor to the George D. Patterson Fund, Katie Tyler. It's hard to encapsulate Katie's accomplishments or her passion and commitment for animals in a brief introduction, but I'm going to do my very best. Katie is the founder of Tyler 2 Construction and has completed more than 20 million square feet of new and renovated office space, retail, medical, light industrial, and restaurant space. But in her free time, she's also an incredible contributor to the nonprofit sector, having served on over 26 boards, trained 8 puppies to become certified guide dogs and perhaps counting, and most recently having chaired the Humane Society of Charlotte's Capital Campaign. I can think of no one better to join me today to discuss the importance of this work and how the George D. Patterson's transformational legacy gift has empowered FFTC to advance animal welfare by honoring his donor intent. So this is a little bit of an overview of our agenda. And prior to diving into the specifics of the Patterson Fund, I'm going to just provide a little bit of a brief overview of Foundation for the Carolinas. So as this region's community foundation, FFTC's mission is to inspire philanthropy and empower individuals to create a better community. FFTC was established in 1958 and serves a 13-county region in North and South Carolina. Although grant making is not confined to our territory, and donors can certainly direct grants to public charities across the country. We provide fund management to generous individuals, corporations, and visionary nonprofits. And as the 5th largest community foundation in the country, we have almost $4 billion in assets held across 3,000 unique funds. However, more important than the assets we hold are the dollars that generous donors distribute. In 2020 and 2021 combined, during 2 years of pandemic-fueled uncertainty, our fund holders granted out more than $900 million to deserving nonprofits, including many serving animals. In addition to fund management, we also have the pleasure of serving a smaller number of clients who desire additional governance and oversight. And in those instances, we help to facilitate board meetings and operate formal grant-making programs like the Patterson Fund, which is the topic of today's webinar. We also offer comprehensive planned giving and are happy to be a thought leader and partner for nonprofits seeking to launch their own planned giving campaigns. We know that that's so incredibly valuable for long-term sustainability of an organization. We have found, as is common in the community foundation world, that planned gifts are often the bedrock of important grant-making initiatives. Often these gifts are among the most significant and provide individuals of all means a pathway to give back and to make an impact. The Community Foundation movement was established over 100 years ago in Cleveland, Ohio by a trust officer, Frederick Goff, pictured here, who wanted to ensure that there was a community organization in place that could balance the honoring of donor intent with responding to evolving community needs that were not yet knowable. Since that time, the Community Foundation field has proliferated with over 800 community foundations across the country, and we have the great pleasure of working collaboratively with many of them. Part of our responsibility, which we take incredibly seriously, is to ensure the vitality of this community in perpetuity. And so as a result, FFTC tracks fundholder grant making and maps it to 8 philanthropic interest areas, including animal welfare. These areas are designed to align with our community's priorities and our region's needs. And personally, as somebody who shares Katie's passion for animals, I'm heartened to see increasing interest in this area and more active grant making to this space. As I mentioned on the previous slide, part of our responsibility is to ensure that we help advise our clients on where they can make the biggest impact and where there are documented needs in our community. To that end, we know that individuals are increasingly thinking about pets as an integral part of their personal lives and our community. In fact, over 2/3 of US households now live with cats and dogs. And further, at least in North and South Carolina, there's a demonstrated need for us to take better care of our companion animals. Per data compiled by Best Friends, only 29.77% of North Carolina's shelters are no-kill, and South Carolina is only nominally better at 41.67%. Finally, we know and are encouraged that individuals are deploying their charitable dollars to help. In a recent Blackbud study, research indicates that there was a 14.6% increase in dollars directed to animal welfare year over year, and we see a similar trend emerging locally too. This is all helpful data which can be connected back to the work of nonprofits, perhaps like you, and the work that you need to continue to do to help support this great interest area. Finally, and before I turn it over to Katie, I think it's important for me to underscore what seems to inspire my donors to give back. So if I were to summarize it, it's really three main things. So first, of course, a sincere passion for the cause, something that comes from their heart and is core to who they are. Second, a clear statement of need from the nonprofit. And third, a narrative that connects the stated need to the nonprofit's work and their outcomes, i.e. most donors want to know that the dollars that they give are going to make a difference. So for example, in the animal welfare context, articulating that there is a need because only 39 of 124 shelters in our state are no-kill is good supporting information, or sharing that you're trying to save more of the 28,790 cats and dogs killed would be a powerful narrative likely to inspire mission-aligned donors. Okay, with that in mind, in that context, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to dive into the details of the Patterson Fund and its history and how the committee approaches grant making.
Thank you, Whitney. So my part of the presentation today is to talk about the grant making process, tell you a little bit about the Patterson Foundation grant, how it was organized, how it got put together, and what we are looking to do both now and in the future. And then we're going to address some common questions that have come in about our grant making process. So first of all, a history of the Patterson Fund. George D. Patterson was a very prominent real estate developer in Charlotte. He was very supportive of animal welfare during his lifetime, and he left a legacy. He and his daughter Sally left a legacy for animal welfare, which was their main passion. The Patterson Fund was started by the assets from their estate. Since that estate was started in 2001, we have granted more than $3 million to nonprofits across the Carolinas. Our typical grants range from $5,000 to $25,000, but we have, on special needs occasions, granted much larger grants, again, special circumstances. We are a committee of 5. We have a shared passion for animals, and we oversee the grant-making process with seriousness, compassion, and outreach. We recognize that the animal welfare causes evolve. In the past, it started as a rabies stopping process. Now it seems to be focused more on spay-neuter to address the euthanasia issue across the state. And because we are making huge progress in the spay-neuter area, we are actively researching what's next in animal welfare. Once we solve the spay-neuter euthanasia issue, how do we encourage adoption? How do we look at community outreach issues and education about animal welfare? And we are a sieve about that information. So our mission statement, as you can see here, established in 2001, the Patterson Committee supports nonprofits that create a more humane and sustainable world for domestic animals and their owners. Short, sweet, to the point. So let's now jump into the grant application process, how it works, what we look for, what we're going to be looking for. At one point, we were an open process. In other words, anybody who wanted a grant could apply, and we recognized early on how difficult that was to manage. So we have gone to an invitation-only process, which Sounds elitist, but it is not. It just simply means that we vet those people who are interested in applying for a grant to ensure that their programs, their processes align with our directives from our donors, and that they check all the boxes, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. It is not our intent to have 50 grants put before us and we only grant 20 of them. It is our intent to fully vet those grants or those grant processes so that the likelihood of the grant being awarded is extremely high. We also recognize that there is a ridiculous amount of work required to submit a grant application, and we have done a lot of work to try to make our process and the information that we request not just busy work, but work that really affects how we evaluate the programs and how we make the grants. We ensure that there is alignment between the grant making priorities and the scope of the project and our donor intent. Because our grants, our amount of money that we have to award is growing, our grants are growing, and we fully intend and believe that that will only increase over time. Last year, we instituted an impact grant. This is likely something that we were going to look at annually, and it is a relatively large award that is going to be awarded to the organization that most effectively demonstrates their ability to produce programming and to produce outcomes that are impactful to the animal welfare world. The things that we look at clearly in the background of that are that there is a organizational sustainability to the nonprofit that is applying, and that there is a strong leadership with a succession plan in place for leadership over time. We have developed a letter of inquiry, which we are actively advertising right now. We recognize that we only know those groups that we know, and that there are hundreds of groups out there that we don't know that are probably doing wonderful things that do align with our directive. The letter of inquiry can be received by making an inquiry to the Foundation for the Carolinas. It is short and sweet, no more than 2 pages. It's very clear on what it asks. And I'm not going to go over the details of that, but it's very specific. It's only 2 pages. And by submitting an LOI, it provides new organizations, some that may have been grant recipients of us in the past and are not now for whatever reason, and some that we are not aware of, provides them with a pathway to the grant program that the Patterson Foundation advisors administer. So how do we evaluate the grants once we do get them? Well, the first thing we look at is that the organization has a clear mission that aligns with our committee's focus. We also recognize that that focus is changing, but if you look at our mission statement, I think that will tell you exactly what you need to know about what our focus is. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking for strong leadership, not only from the staff, but also from the board, with a clear succession plan and established governance policies that are followed. We are looking for stable, clear financials, liabilities that are ideally 50% or less than their assets. We are looking for an organization that is not going to depend on the Patterson Foundation for their significant funding sources. We want the organization to have developed a diverse revenue stream, either from grants or individual donors or events or earned revenue, whatever that income stream is. We're looking for an organization that has a diverse stream. We're also looking for a clear and accurate 990 that is that's easy to follow. It's a pretty clear document, but you'd be surprised how many of those are not as clear as you'd think that they would be. We are looking for organizations that constantly evaluate the animal welfare community, the need, and an innovative problem solver, somebody that sees a problem and comes up with an idea to solve it that is effective. We're looking for preventative programs as well as reactive systemic programs. We're looking for organizations that provide cost-effective services, whether it be spay-neuter or adoption or taking care of high-risk animals or high-needs animals. We're looking for cost-effective delivery of services. And we also consider those organizations that are specifically targeting those communities that are in service deficit areas that don't have easy access to the services that are needed for their companion animals. So let's get to some common questions. What are some questions that are out there that have come to us in the past that we think may be a good thing to address here?
Absolutely. And one thing that I would add is if you're watching this and you still have questions about how the committee is going to evaluate grants or what to include in the letter of inquiry, Foundation for the Carolinas is happy to help. You can always reach out to me or my colleague, Wakefield, who also helps provide support for this committee. So just know that you have resources available. But we got some great questions in, and so I'll ask Katie these and let her share how the committee makes decisions. So which of the valuation metrics is most important is the first question that came in.
And I am recognizing that I am one of 5, but I think that there's a consistency that we are looking for the impact. What is the result of the services and the programs that you provide? Not just what do you do, not just how you do it, not just how much it costs, but what is the result? What is the impact that you are making in the communities that you serve? What difference does it make that you exist?
Absolutely, and I can attest to the conversations that have happened around that very thing. So definitely impact is a huge driver. Will the committee consider nonprofits working outside North or South Carolina?
We are located in Charlotte, which is right on the border of North or South Carolina. It's very easy for us to research, do field visits, which we actively do, to make sure that the organizations are doing what they say they're doing and are following our directives with regard to the grant that they are applying for. Having said that, we recognize also that there are some wonderful things being done outside of North and South Carolina. I'm not going to say we're going to do grants in California, but in the past we have addressed areas that had emergency needs. Katrina, for example, the floods in Columbia, South Carolina, for example, that extended way down almost into Georgia. We would consider them, the grant would have to be compelling.
Wonderful. And the next question was, can I submit a grant for operational costs, and what does unrestricted really mean?
Good question. We recognize that when we give an organization money, it goes into their bank account, and whether it's one pocket on the right or one pocket on the left, it's one account. I mentioned earlier that we are looking for a compelling difference. A grant application that is submitted to say, I want to pay the light bill, it would be hard for us to consider that a compelling reason for us to give you money. But having said that, as long as you are doing the program that you are applying for grants for, we are not going to ask you for copies of checks that go to that specific thing. All we're really interested in is that the work is being done, the results are being achieved, and the difference is being made.
Fabulous. I know that it's so helpful, particularly these days, for nonprofits to have some flexibility. So those unrestricted dollars really go a long way. I'm sure anyone listening in is really delighted to hear that. The next question is, what should I do if the project I submitted becomes fully funded prior to the committee's decision?
And we have actually had that happen in the past. The first thing you do is notify the foundation contact immediately. You notify Whitney or Ayanna and just tell them, I just want to let you know this. If you have another project that is field ready, we would consider you resubmitting with that new project. A lot of it's going to depend on the timing of it. If it's 2 days before our grant process, that's probably unrealistic. But our desire is for an honest conversation with all of our relationships, and that if your project becomes fully funded, we want to celebrate that with you, and we want to find other ways that we can help you achieve your goals.
And I just want to underscore something you said, Katie, because I think that it's so important for nonprofits tuning in to hear, which is that this committee really does want to build reciprocal relationships with the nonprofits that are receiving funding. And so that transparency builds trust over time and is so essential to developing the relationship. And so I would just reiterate that if something's changed for your organization, that it's really helpful for you to reach out and share that with the committee and with the foundation staff first and foremost, that it does build that trust and the reciprocity. And this is a committee that is not punitive, but rather really does have a passion for this work and wants to understand your position as an organization.
Thank you for adding that, because it's not just relative to the grant process. If there's other significant changes in your organization, whether you're launching a capital campaign, or whether your CEO has retired, or whether your board chair suddenly resigns, anything that is a significant event in your organization, we want to be aware of that so that we can support you in the best way we can.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a great segue into this next question, which is, what should I do if I have an emergency need that arises following submission of my grant, but prior to the award?
We also recognize that there are emergency needs. A tree can fall on your spay-neuter clinic, and all of a sudden your need is to raise funds to do that repair service. We recognize that those things do happen. And while I can't specifically say that we would always recognize the emergency need over the submission of the grant, I could say that this group is an empathetic group when it comes to special needs, and that we would give it every consideration we possibly could.
Absolutely. And again, something I can attest to because I've seen it firsthand in the position that I hold. The other thing that I would say is this question specifically asked about an instance in which the emergency need arose following the submission, but prior to the award. I would say, that it's also helpful for you to reach out to FFTC and to Ayanna and myself if you have an emergency need that arises even post the grant award. Not that the Patterson Committee is necessarily going to be running a second cycle, right? But this is a group of individuals who are really passionate about this area and incredibly well connected. So there may be resources that can be offered other than financial resources. And I think one of the benefits of a community foundation is that we have a broad base of support to pull from. And so while the Patterson Committee is certainly our most significant grant-making body related to animal welfare, as I mentioned, we do increasingly have other funders who are very interested in this space as well. And so there might be an opportunity for us to make a connection outside of the Patterson Committee that could also help provide support for your emergency. So I think if I were to summarize, just better to be overly communicative versus, not. And we really do value, again, that transparency. And then the final question was just, does the Patterson Committee award grants for animal therapy programs?
We have in the past funded a service dog program. We have not to date awarded a grant or received a grant request in the animal therapy program. And I can honestly say this is probably an area in which the committee needs to be a little more well informed. So I would say for those of you who have an animal therapy program, submit your LOI, perhaps let us schedule a field visit. We are all about impact in the community. Sometimes with service dog programs, you're matching one dog with one person. So the impact is relatively small. And I don't discount the difference that we're making for that one person. But when we're following the directives of our donors in making impacts in the community, animal therapy programs may be an area where there are larger impacts, and it's something that we probably would like to have more education on.
Thank you so much for that. And again, just really appreciate the questions were submitted in advance. If you have a question that wasn't addressed in this webinar yet, please do reach out. Again, Ayana and I are happy to address any questions that may arise. And we're so delighted to be able to offer the opportunity to provide a little bit more transparency in terms of what the Patterson Committee is looking for. And would just really like to thank you for listening in, for the work that you're doing in this space. It's so essential. And we'll turn it over to Katie for some final words.
I also would like to echo the thank you. I have been overwhelmed in the last 30 years that I've been actively involved in animal welfare about the big hearts and the generosity and the kindness of people to the animals that they share their homes and their space and their world to. And I think that the world will be a better place when we got more people on board who are doing the same. So thank you.